We're hoping that participants will gain tools to positively manage their family dynamics, regardless of what that looks like, to really think about their planning this holiday season, how they can accept the circumstances for what they are and put their time and energy into celebrating in positive ways that work for their family across the lifespan.
K-State Research and Extension, Family and Consumer Sciences agents, and specialists across the state are offering webinars in January, February, and March to improve our health and well-being. In advance of those webinars, they're offering 2 stress management webinars. The November webinar, focusing on self-care, was recorded and can be found online by searching for Living Well Wednesday. The December webinar is on connecting and communicating to reduce stress through the holidays. On today's Sound Living, communicating effectively with family members and creating an inclusive environment. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Extension Northwest Regional Family and Consumer Sciences Specialist JoEllyn Argabright and Chisholm Trail District Family and Youth Development Agent Tristen Cope are hosting the December 8th webinar. JoEllyn and Tristen, you have a program coming up on December 8th that is going to look at connecting and communicating through the holidays, something that we probably think we do pretty well, but in reality, we probably don't communicate nearly as effectively as we could.
Yes, we are looking forward to connect and communicate, a 45-minute session where we really are hoping to teach participants a variety of methods for connecting with their family members, both near and far.
Is this somewhat complicated, just like it was last year, because we still have the remnants of COVID in place?
Absolutely. COVID really poses some additional challenges for families, both in their ability to congregate and travel, and also in creating inclusive environments where we can accommodate a variety of levels of concern regarding COVID-19 and how that can be handled.
Tristen, when we look at some of the tools that might be in the toolbox, what are some things that you might be able to help people get a little bit more into the communicating mode?
Yes, definitely, Jeff. I think it's really important when we're looking at a holistic family environment to making sure that we're reaching our younger children as well as those who may be teens and even adulthood into older adults. So different ways that we're going to talk about in the program are to connect each other and ways that we can provide that connection. If they're traveling near, if they're traveling far. It's a really hustle-bustle season, and we're going to help to identify those different ways that we can reach the whole family.
Is it a little bit more difficult for younger children who maybe aren't necessarily as familiar with some of the people that you may be interacting with? Does that cause a problem?
Yes, it is very important to keep in mind our younger children that we have in our family. Oftentimes, they kind of get toted around in the hustle-bustle of the season, and it's important to remind yourself that it might be stressful for them. So we help to identify different ways that we can include our youngest children in the planning process and throughout the holiday season itself. There's some family members they may not have seen in quite a while, so we're going to help provide different strategies throughout the presentation that we can include our youngest children and even those that might be into our middle childhood and teens.
Yeah, the middle and the teenage is always a little bit more complicated because sometimes they're maybe more interested in their devices than they are in just the one-on-one aspect.
Yes, that is very common. I think a lot of families can resonate with that, even at their own family dinner table. So we're going to help to figure out and help participants to learn ways that we can include the whole family. Some of them might be a little cheesy, but they can work and they can include your entire family throughout the holiday season.
JoEllyn, as an adult development and aging specialist, what do adult family members bring to the conversation? Because they kind of have a wealth of knowledge and they've been through a lot of these holidays. So what can they do to kind of add to the conversation?
Absolutely. That will be a significant portion of our session, really identifying that family dynamics can be difficult. And that's really highlighted during the holiday season, particularly when we have caregiving situations. And we will provide some tips and tricks for how families can really increase their compassion and teach their family members of all ages to recognize normal sensory decline in some of their aging family members and how to really bring them in to be inclusive and provide some of that history and family tradition while being sensitive to some of their limitations and recognizing that caregiver stress is often exacerbated during the holiday season.
Yeah, I think when looking at our younger children and even that middle childhood age, I think this year is going to be a little bit different in the fact that some of our families have not been together for quite some time now. So I think it's going to be important for all family members to keep in mind that there might be some children who have some shyness. Maybe they don't want to give a hug this year. Maybe they don't fully recognize all of their family members. So I think it's going to be important that we keep that in mind when we are interacting this year, and that kind of plays into that family dynamic. Maybe in the past they had a really great relationship and they were able to go and give hugs and see their family members, but this year may be different. So it's something that we'll have to keep in mind and that we can learn a little bit more about when JoEllyn and I give our presentation.
Do you think that will change over time the longer we're together? For instance, if when we first get there, people might be a little bit more hesitant to interact, and for some people it may just be the fact that they are not going to be comfortable no matter what?
Yeah, I think it can go either way. I think family dynamics and relationships have had a huge impact. They've taken a huge impact over this past year and a half. So I think it will take some time for them to rebuild, whether it's for them to rebuild based upon personal comfort and safety, or whether it's based upon just a family relationship and how the dynamics has worked out over the past year. I am hopeful that we can get back to giving some love and spreading joy to others, but it may look different. It may be a simple hello. It may be a high five. It might be a wave. And so I think it'll take some time and knowing your family members and talking with them about their comfort level.
Well, that's a good point, talking about the comfort level, but we might also be able to pick up on maybe some body language as well. Is that also a form of communication?
Yes, body language is a very large form of communication. I think it's always great, especially with our younger children. Maybe if they don't have the words to express how they are feeling, you can pick up if maybe they're hiding behind a parent or a caregiver, or maybe if they're pulling their body away and withdrawing a little bit. You can always lean towards that body language as a way of expressing how they wish to feel.
How do we approach it when someone is a little bit hesitant, especially if it's a younger child? I'm assuming we want to exercise some patience and not make them go over and give grandma a hug?
Yes, that's a very great question. One thing that I always like to advise parents or advise caregivers is if they have a kiddo and maybe they're used to giving hugs, but this year they're feeling a little hesitant, maybe you can talk to the kiddo and say, "Hi, how are you doing today? Can I give you a hug or would you like a high five?" If you're offering the child or a young children a choice about how their level of comfort is, you're going to get a more positive response for them while still respecting their boundaries that they are setting.
What about in terms of just how children interact with one another? That can also have its own dynamics, right? Especially when they maybe haven't been together for a while or they don't know each other all that well.
Yes, I am really thinking about your cousin dynamics, especially when you gather together as families. Some of them might not have seen each other for over a year now. And so it might take a little bit of time for them to begin playing together, or they might be very excited to have another peer their age that they get to engage with. And so a lot of it's going to be kind of just taking some time, making sure that we're not forcing a new relationship, but offering it as a way for them to engage.
I don't know if this is part of the toolbox, but do you maybe have some icebreakers? Because I know we do this on Zoom conferences and we do this when we're at meetings and things like that. Sometimes we just need something to get the ball rolling. Is that something that you are going to cover, is maybe how to get people more engaged in communicating?
We do have some resources and tips and tricks for practicing purposeful communication, whether that is in person or on some sort of virtual platform. So we may provide some modeling of how families might go about using those as an icebreaker, but then also being purposeful and prudent about including all of their family members, whether they're in the room, in person, or in picture.
Is it different if you're doing something virtually again this year as opposed to doing it face-to-face? Are there some other dynamics then that come into play?
Absolutely. Body language is much more difficult to interpret over virtual platforms, and you lose some of that connection, and we're getting very well versed at how to connect more appropriately or more deeply via virtual platforms. But in light of recent circumstances, I think we're going to do the best we can with what we have, and all families could be expecting that to look just a little bit different again this year.
This is part of the Stress Less series, so as part of that, you're trying to make this more of a, I guess, harmonious get-together. We want holidays and things like that to elicit good, positive memories, and by kind of keeping things in check and communicating well, we can make those a good event for everybody?
Absolutely. We're hoping that participants will gain tools to positively manage their family dynamics, regardless of what that looks like, to really think about their planning this holiday season, how they can accept the circumstances for what they are and put their time and energy into celebrating in positive ways that work for their family across the lifespan.
Maybe cover some of the things you're going to go more in depth on in terms of creating that inclusive environment. What goes into that?
Sure. When looking kind of at the younger children, when looking at that age group, we're going to really give them some great tools and tips when you're planning your family holidays or your traditions this year. One, for example, is when you're thinking of your kiddos or your younger children, maybe having a special table for them where they can connect again or engage with their siblings or with their cousins. Having some different foods for them that's going to be more appropriate to their appetite and to their palate. Another one would be maybe they haven't had a chance to practice some of that tone reading or some patience. And so thinking through, how are you going to do gifts if that's something your family does? How are you going to pass out the gifts? Are you going to make your kiddos wait to open a gift? Or just thinking through some of those sensory needs. There's a lot of things right now with young children that they're going through in their lives. And so thinking through some of the ways to make it a stressless holiday for them, ways that they can learn maybe family members' names or pull out a photo album and you can revisit what those family members look like, especially if they're not in person and if they're on a virtual component such as the Zoom platform. Thinking through ways that you can still connect with those family members and happen to know who they are.
Children always seem to do better when they know what's going on and what the plan is. So that might be another important aspect, is to really go over what is going to happen.
Yes. One of my favorite things to do with young children is making sure that they have their own calendar, a way that they know that they can keep track of time and events and places that they're going to go. So I invite participants to take their own calendar, have one special for your kiddo. Maybe put different stickers when it says, I'm going to go to Grandma and Grandpa's house, or I'm going to celebrate family Christmas at home. Invite them in that planning making process so they have ownership and that they're able to plan and stick to a routine.
In terms of a virtual conversation, that may be a 15, 30-minute Zoom where you kind of get in and say, happy holidays to everybody, how are you doing, that sort of thing. But when you're someplace for maybe a day or two, it becomes a little bit more stressful, I would imagine.
I think it is really important for families to communicate their expectations as they go into the holiday season. It's very easy to be swayed by the hustle and bustle and the buy, give, party mentality, when we'll sit down with participants and really encourage them to outline what is reasonable for them to participate and host, keeping in mind that it's not only our young children that can get overwhelmed at this time of year. Often our older family members really get overwhelmed. They tend to be in situations with a lot of high volume and background noise. It's very difficult for them to participate in situations. We tend to cram extra tables into our rooms to accommodate a larger family, meals that we're not used to, creating a lot of fall hazards, things that younger members of the family and even adults really don't notice. And so it's going to be really important for families entering the holidays to outline what is reasonable for them to host or to accommodate their family members and not be shy about communicating. We'd like to get together for a couple of hours. Why don't we plan on having a light meal and then we'll end at such and such a time? Keeping in mind that you want to have time for everyone to congregate, but it is okay to say enough is enough. It's time for us to go back to our environments where we're comfortable. And many families may be facing hybrid celebrations this year where they have to manage having members over as well as on virtual platforms and creating space where everyone has the opportunity to connect and really kind of outlining what that may look like and what their expectations are for communication there as well.
If people want to join in on this webinar, how can they do that?
If you'd like to join us for this presentation, you can always contact your local extension office or visit the K-State Research and Extension webpage, Living Well Wednesday.
That's K-State Research and Extension Chisholm Trail District Family and Youth Development Agent Tristen Cope and Northwest Regional Family and Consumer Sciences Specialist JoEllyn Argabright. Again, for more information, visit the Extension webpage, Living Well Wednesday. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.